behalf of the committee, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. It's an honor to have you all here, and it's great to have such a big crowd. I want to send our appreciation on behalf of the committee to so many people, and I just hope that I don't miss anyone. First of all, I want to thank Devin Clark, one of our panelists, for bringing the map that you'll see in the back of the room. If you haven't had a chance, it would be great if there are any intersections or corridors that you think deserve some closer scrutiny. There are stickies there, and please just write a note. There are also pens, obviously. That would be great. We'd love your feedback. I also want to thank Sean Barry, the University of Connecticut, who arranged for the reduced mobility demonstration tools that you see over there. And if you haven't had a chance to try them out, thank you very much for coming all the way down. And they really provide a worthwhile insight about how people who are mobility impaired function. Many thanks to Sustainable Fairfield for inviting us to participate in their Sustainability and Inclusive Growth Speaker Series, and for their great support all around. Becky Bunnell is here tonight representing Sustainable Fairfield, so thank you very much. And of course, thank you to the library and to Philip Barr, the librarian who has helped put this evening together and made it all organized and so on. We also want to thank the First Selectman's Office for helping to spread the word about tonight's event. And lastly, I want to thank our fearless leader, Sarah Mason, chair of the Bike Ped Committee, who has been involved in the organization of tonight's event, and so much else. I can't give you enough credit wherever you are. I'm not seeing you. Oh, there's Sarah. Lastly, second to last, Francisco Mira, another member of the Bike Ped Committee, isn't here, but it's thanks to him that we have this great presentation that you're about to see. Before I turn things over, I want to introduce Rich Donovan, who's going to be the moderator this evening. Rich is Director of Transportation Planning for the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, where he heads the agency's work in highway, public transportation, and active transportation, as well as the tie-in between public transit and transit-oriented development. As a trained planner, he brings a focus on roadway safety to the NVCOG, establishing a roadway safety audit program, expanding the agency's safety review process, and ensuring that regional projects are designed for all users. Originally from Southington, Rich spent many years in DC and in Northern Virginia, before returning to Connecticut, where he now lives in New Haven with his wife, Allie, and their dog, Vino. So with that, Rich, please come take it away.
All right, well, thank you. First of all, if we could get this many people to turn out to anything up when we do meetings, this would be fantastic. This is incredible to see so many people dedicated to the progression of safe streets here in Fairfield, and to learning more about it and hearing what your town staff have to say about it. So I do want to say thank you to the Bike and Ped Committee for inviting me. Again, anytime we can talk about roadway safety, we consider it a win. The more we can get the word out, the more we can share, and the more we can help inspire residents and citizens across the state to understand and to help advocate for these types of improvements in our communities is a big win for us. So we're going to run through a little bit of background on Vision Zero and Complete Streets before getting into a panel discussion with some of your town and regional staff. I just again want to shout out Francisco for this incredible slide deck. Some absolutely beautiful pictures of your community in here. To start with, just a little bit of background on what Vision Zero actually is. Vision Zero is a lot of things, but what it's not is a prescriptive process. Ultimately, at its core, Vision Zero is a goal, and it is something to work toward. It's really a global version of transit and transportation planners and engineers buying into the same general mission. And what that mission is to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities from our roads. We don't accept serious injuries and fatalities in almost any other part of our lives on a regular basis. But last year, 40,000 Americans died while traveling on our roads, and that we don't think is acceptable. We don't think that is something that we should live with. You know, we think about how many times traffic deaths show up in TV, in movies, in our pop culture, and while they're always portrayed as tragic, they're never portrayed as unacceptable, and that is something we need to change. And so the Vision Zero initiative fundamentally takes that approach. That roadway deaths and roadway serious injuries are unacceptable, and that when we're building and planning our roadway system, we should be acting as such. And you know, at its very core, right? Safe streets are a lot more than just safe streets. Safe streets help us build stronger communities. They help us feel better about our communities and more connected to our communities. They give us more options. You know, one thing that we're hearing more and more about is the number of mobility options that are available to residents, especially as Connecticut and as our population ages. And so having those options is important. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is really critical, and we'll get into this the next slide, but Vision Zero implementation is not about eliminating crashes. If we could eliminate all crashes, then this wouldn't be a problem, right? If we could eliminate the crash, we would eliminate all injuries, we would eliminate all fatalities. But we've been trying that for 100 years. And from the moment there were 2 cars in the state of Ohio, there were car crashes in the state of Ohio. And so we know that it's not realistic to eliminate crashes. And so the real goal of Vision Zero is to help reduce the severity of those crashes when they happen, to ensure that the systems are in place to address the mistakes that drivers are going to make, and that when those crashes do happen, that there's an emergency response system in place to help minimize the long-term damage of those. So if you look here, this is some data from the last several years here in Fairfield. You're not alone in a lot of these trends, right? You'll see crashes are happening all over town, of varying severity. There's certainly clusters, but those clusters are not necessarily the only places where this is happening. And that over the course of the last 5 years, there's a relatively flat trend of a couple of better years, a couple of worse years, but in general, the number of fatalities and the number of serious injuries have been relatively flat. And that, across Connecticut, we saw a huge jump in 2020. We saw that kind of continue into 21 and 2, and have started to see some decrease in the last couple of years because of some really well-coordinated work happening across the state, including actions taken by the state legislature, the Department of Transportation, the Council of Governments, and our municipalities. So Vision Zero originally was a Swedish proposal. You'll see a lot of this will make sense as we start talking about it. It feels like a Swedish idea. But at its core, in 1996, actually I think it was 1994, Sweden had an extremely bad year for roadway safety. Similar to what happened here right around 2020. And their national legislature came together and said, this is unacceptable. We can't allow this to continue. We have to do something about this. And so they formally adopted what they came later to call Vision Zero in 1997. And in the time since, they have dropped from a just about 10 per 100,000 fatality rate on their roads to a 2 per 100,000 fatality rate. It's taken a lot of work. It's a very well-coordinated effort across the Swedish government. And certainly there are things that are applicable here. There are things that don't apply as well here. Things that are within our control at the local and state level, and things that are without. But the fundamental message is exactly what we need to be talking about. And that fundamental message is that traffic deaths are preventable. They are not part of a pact we have to make to have a modern roadway system. They are no more necessary in our roads than they are in our skies, or than they are in our public transportation system, where we take every one of these fatal incidents and review it very carefully to learn what happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. The second core principle here is that people make mistakes. We all do, right? It's a part of being human. Maybe it's looking away from the road for a second while you're driving. Maybe it's the steering wheel slips in your hand, right? We all go a little too fast sometimes. We all make mistakes while we drive. And so fundamentally, we're never going to eliminate those mistakes. And so the goal isn't to eliminate the mistake, but to help put systems in place to minimize the impact when they happen. The next piece, I think we all generally agree, is that humans are physically vulnerable. When we get hit, it causes damage. And while that doesn't sound like something that we should have to call out, it is. And it is because of this equation on the right, which we'll talk about. But there's actually really good and really easy to follow data about how much energy our bodies are designed to absorb. And so when we're talking about designing streets based on context, knowing how much energy we can safely transfer into somebody in a crash is important. And how we mitigate the rest of that energy is the safe systems approach. And so the last principle is that we need to be making these decisions based on data. We often will choose things that feel good or that look good. Everybody's driven through an intersection, or I guess maybe only us professionals have driven through intersections or interchanges or some kind of a roadway structure, and some engineer was really proud of that because of how complex it was. And we know that happens all the time, but that's not always the best answer. And that sometimes the data suggests exactly what we should be doing, and we now know that we are committed to following that data. And so all of this speaks to this equation on the right, which I realize got just a little bit cut off, but it is mass times velocity squared over 2 is kinetic energy. Everything related to roadway safety is related to kinetic energy. And so we can talk about every other element, but at its core, every element we do is about one of two things. It is reducing the amount of kinetic energy before a crash happens, or dissipating the kinetic energy when a crash does happen. We talk about this all the time as well. Everybody's heard that cars from the 50s and 60s were built way better than cars today, because when you hit something in a car from the 50s, nothing happened. Well, that was actually a fundamental flaw with those cars. They were great at protecting themselves, but all of the energy in that crash went into the people and the structures that were being hit. Modern cars are designed to crumple, and while that will total a car at 4 miles per hour, it does, it absorbs a lot of that energy and adds a lot of additional safety. Same thing is true with airbags. The whole point of an airbag is to absorb energy in that crash, so that rather than you as the body absorbing that energy, it gets taken up by the mechanical system. So when we talk about Vision Zero, one of the core elements we'll get to is complete streets. And complete streets are important because of their ability to reduce the kinetic energy before that crash happens. Some of the elements that are out of our hands are related to the management of kinetic energy after the crash happens. We see a divergence between some of the crash testing here in the US and in Europe. And so, you know, we hear about our 5-star crash ratings here. Those are the cars that are best at dissipating the energy for you as the occupant. But we don't look at what happens to external people or the other vehicle in one of those crashes. The Euro NCAP rating, which is the equivalent of our NHTSA ratings, has started to look at that as well. And so that's one of the ways that Sweden is really trying to tackle that last 2 per 100,000 fatality rate, is looking at the better ways to address the kinetic energy in that system when a crash does happen. And that kinetic energy is really important because velocity is squared in that equation. And so speed makes a huge difference. You've probably seen some version of an image like this before. And if you haven't, I guarantee you will again, especially with Fairfield's commitment. But the difference of getting hit by a car at 20 miles per hour and 40 miles per hour is an 80% chance of survival. And so when we're talking about designing streets where we know people will be, the lower we can have the average travel speed, the more likely that a potential crash is not fatal. The more likely somebody survives that crash. One of the things we do know, though, is that our bodies are not all the same. And so that 5% fatality rate of 20 miles per hour isn't necessarily that you as a person have a 5% chance. It is that roughly 5% of people. And so in areas where we know we have younger children, or we have more elderly people, or we have people with pre-existing or other factors that might lead them to be more damaged or more injured in a crash, we need to take that into account as well. The only truly safe crash between a car and a pedestrian is the one that doesn't happen. And so, you know, there's always the chance that somebody is hurt. There's always the chance that somebody dies in a fatal or in a vehicle pedestrian crash. And that is one of the things that we take into a lot of consideration as we're looking at building out streets for people and not just streets for cars. So Vision Zero looks at roadway safety a little bit different. And the way have best heard it described is like a block of Swiss cheese. Any one individual slice is going to have a bunch of holes in it, and those holes are the opportunity for something to go wrong in whatever that one element of the roadway safety system is. And so a single element, right? If the single element is that the driver is going to behave responsibly, we know there are holes in that because we already talked about people make mistakes when they drive. And so the next, that alone isn't enough to eliminate roadway deaths or to keep our streets safe. What we need is to add a lot more slices. Eventually, if you add enough slices, you cover all of the holes. We know that the ability to cover all the holes is probably unlikely on most of our streets. And so the goal is to line up as much as we can to prevent anything from fitting through. And so the safe systems approach is just that. It is overlapping and duplicative efforts to reduce the likelihood of the crash in the first place, reduce the amount of kinetic energy in a crash when it does happen, and to better absorb that kinetic energy if a crash does happen. The last element of that is the post-crash care. If a crash does happen, how do we ensure that people get the care they need as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible to reduce the potential for long-term harm? And so, safer roads, safer people, safer vehicles, and safer speeds all fundamentally revolve around that exact same kinetic energy equation. So we talk about this, we really talk about, we can talk all we want about a safe system idea, but a safe system idea is just that, it's an idea. And what we really need to talk about is what do our streets look like? How do we do this in our towns? How do we make this work across Fairfield and across Connecticut, and across the country? And so one of the best tools we have along a developed street is complete streets. And the concept of complete streets, I think, is another one. We often assume that complete streets is like a thing. That this is now a complete street or this is not a complete street. And that's not true. Complete streets, there's like 100, we at NVCOG published a guidebook for our towns with all of the elements they could consider. And I want to say there's 115 different things in there that could go into a complete street. No street's going to have all 115. That is just not, it's not how it works. It's not doable. But picking the ones that make sense for the context of that street are really what make this work for us. So you'll see here on the left, right, that is a street we're all very familiar with. The 4-lane arterial, 2 travel lanes, no anything else. And that does fit in some contexts. That is a great way to get between 2 places if there's no development in between. It allows for higher travel speeds, it allows for faster, for more traffic volume. But that doesn't necessarily make sense in our downtown areas, or in our neighborhoods, or near schools, or libraries, or other public institutions. And so, when we get into that type of situation, some of these elements you see on the right might make more sense, right? The street on the right is designed to better accommodate pedestrians. It's designed to better accommodate cyclists. It's designed to better accommodate people of differing abilities as they use the street. And as a result, it also works better for motorists in that context, because they're no longer in a scenario where they don't know what's going to happen next. It helps to put the whole scenario into better context for that driver. And one of the things that a good or a well-done complete street will do is give you a real visual clue as to how fast you should be going. I think, hopefully I'm not going to regret admitting this in a room full of police officers, but I know I've looked down and found myself going a lot faster than the posted speed limit. And that happens because the road was designed to allow for that. Complexity is what tells us how fast we should be driving. Our highways in the United States are some of the best in the world, some of the safest in the world, because they are designed for exactly what they are. They are for limited interruptions, right? So we only have some entrance and exits. We call them limited access highways for a reason. They're designed for high speed. They're designed to move a lot of cars for longer distances. And they do that by giving you the context clues that it is okay to drive faster and it is okay to maintain that faster speed. And that is through wide clear zones on either side. There's nothing visually limiting the space you're seeing. You have long sight lines. You have very clear delineation of where you should be and where you shouldn't be. And so do the other drivers. But when we apply that same type of road to the streets that we all live on, it gives that same message, that it's okay to drive faster, that you're going to be on this road for a while, that you're not looking to what's around you, you're not worried about the complexity of what might be coming up, but rather that you're here to move fast and to move a lot of cars. And so the real goal is to set that context to align with the actual built environment around the road. And this can look like a bunch of different things, right? So we talk about sidewalk zones. In many places, sidewalks don't need zones. A sidewalk is the sidewalk, you walk on it. But in a lot of places, there can be a lot more to it than that. And so both of these images are, one is Waterbury, one's New Haven. They're both a bit more of an urban context here in Connecticut. But there's nothing about this concept that couldn't apply right here outside of the library. And I think something that's important is that we often talk about roadway safety in an urban context, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's nothing inherently urban about wanting to be safe while on your street. I think fundamentally this is the same reason we apply this in an urban setting is why we should apply this in a suburban setting and in a rural setting, which is that we all want to know that when our loved ones leave that they're going to come back. And whether that's happening walking down Audubon Street in New Haven or walking down Route 1 here in Fairfield, you should expect that same outcome. This is one we use often. We use very often. So curb extensions, they're a great way to tell drivers that something is about to change. It reduces the total width of the lane. Lane width is one of the best indicators of how fast people are going to drive. If you have a lot of room, you're just naturally going to drive faster. It is just the way our brains function. And so if we can narrow that, if we can make that room, or make it so you have less room, you're naturally going to pay more attention and slow down a little bit. The other thing it does though, and this is really where it's most important, it reduces the distance the pedestrian is exposed, right? Part of that Swiss cheese model, one of those layers or one of those slices is reducing exposure. The less time you have a person and a car in the same place, the better. And we separate people and vehicles in a couple of different ways, right? We separate them physically and we separate them in time. And so when I say we separate them in time, I mean we have traffic signals that give cars all red so people can cross. That puts pedestrians and cars in a different time. And then we have physical separation. We put people on sidewalks and we put cars in the street. This is one of those examples. There's no guaranteed time separation and there's no physical separation here. And so the least amount of exposure, or the less exposure, the better. We also can talk about traffic calming elements. So these are other things that happen to slow you down. I know speed humps are one of the most controversial items in every town in Connecticut, probably every town in America. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan. I think they have their inherent flaws. But I think where that changes, if you put something fragile on top of it, you're gonna see a much better result. And so what you're looking at on the left here is a raised crosswalk. And so that raised crosswalk, the point where the car is moving the slowest is at the top of that speed hump, or in this case, the speed table, which is the same place where that car is the most likely to encounter the conflict with pedestrian. On the right side, you're seeing a raised intersection, a full raised intersection. And similarly, the place you're most likely to encounter conflict is in the intersection. And so if that's where you're moving the slowest, that is the best for everybody. One thing you'll notice here, on that intersection on the right, there are bollards in place at each of those corners. So that's where, if we don't have the curb for that physical separation, we replicate that physical separation with bollards. Some additional images here of curb extensions. One thing we're going to talk about when we get into the panel discussion in a few minutes here is something like this image on the bottom, which is that these don't always have to be construction projects. These don't have to be expensive, and they don't have to take a long time. We want to achieve zero as soon as possible. We don't want to have to spend years doing design on every road first. And we know that's not possible. If we had the money to replace every street in every town, we would do so. But that is very unrealistic. And so rather than having to dig the street up, do new curbs, do new drainage, do everything, if we can put flex posts and make a similar safety improvement, that's a huge win. And these are the types of elements that your town staff are looking at regularly. So, one of the things, kind of coming back to that urban versus suburban mentality, you are one of the first and one of the most active suburban communities in Connecticut pursuing a Vision Zero system, which I think is pretty incredible. You are also in the middle of, or you've made a change that I think is really exciting to see, and I think many towns are going to try and copy, which is the adoption of a Fairfield Traffic Authority. that is not a single person, but that is made up of members across town from different backgrounds, different areas of work, all contributing to the same thing. Achieving zero deaths is not a one-person task, nor is it a one-discipline task. It requires the input of everybody. And so you'll see as we talk with members of your staff tonight that this really is a town-wide initiative. This is something that everybody is bought into, everybody understands the importance of, and that everybody in every office in town is working together on. And I think that's pretty incredible, and it is something that is relatively unique to here in Fairfield right now, but something that I hope we see a lot more of, certainly across Connecticut, but ideally across the country. So, quick note for all of you, as residents, as participants in our roadway system, always drive safely. You know, I know you're gonna make mistakes. We all do. But remember what's actually at stake. We as humans are really good at underestimating the risk of driving and also overestimating the benefit of some of those mistakes. You know, we think about 10 miles per hour over the speed limit as generally you're not gonna get pulled over at that rate, right? I think we've all heard 9 you're fine, 10 you're fine. Well, that 10 miles per hour is not going to give you the benefit you think it is, and I think that's where we overestimate that benefit a lot. 10 miles per hour over across a quarter mile, we're talking about seconds of time saved, but the potential to seriously alter yours or somebody else's life. And so, I think one of those culture changes that we need to focus on is exactly that, is understanding exactly how much risk there is, and exactly what the rewards are we're making that risk for. And if we do that, that balance changes quite a bit. You know, I think this is true across the state, and certainly here in your community, is to support these changes as they're happening. These things can't happen without residents and without voters and without the support of the community. And the flip side is they only happen with the support of the community. But that support is a lot more than just a single road project, right? What you're talking about here is the lives and well-being of your neighbors and residents. And so participating in the public engagement process and advocating for supportive legislation are all parts of that same process. The fact that you're all here tonight is a huge step. Like I said, if we could get this kind of a turnout for roadway safety initiatives in every town across the state, I think we'd be talking about this very differently. And so with that, we're gonna move into a panel discussion. And so if panelists would like to come up to the table. So I have been informed though that Senator Tony Hwang is here in the room. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
So, at the state legislative level, especially since the formation of the Vision Zero Council, there's been a lot of work towards advancing this across the state, you know, including a couple of bills supporting the recommendations of the Vision Zero Council and some talk or some progress on automated traffic enforcement. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure, we've made great progress, and great credit needs to be given to Commissioner Eucalito of the Connecticut DOT. Sorry to make everybody turn their back. I think the most important part of it is greater awareness. I think Vision Zero, as you've shared, is a European idea that we are adopting in America, but we have to change the dynamic of how we drive and how our communities are structured, because we are in a kind of a car-driven and point A to point B fast type of a dynamic. So we're looking at really changing infrastructure as well as some of the legislation that goes into creating awareness and education. But I think the most important part is that we have implemented some aspects of Vision Zero, which are to be able to have speed cameras and red light cameras with the adoption of local municipal governments say in. And one of the most important things we wanted to reiterate, we want to balance it with civil liberties of individuals when you look at red light and speed camera. One of the most important things that we looked at when we instituted the idea of municipalities putting in red light and speed cameras was it wasn't intended to be a budget revenue maker. It was implicit with our legislation when we helped co-write it that it was intended to be a deterrent. The deterrent was to be able to have multiple signage before red light cameras and speed cameras are in place. And also that every single dollar that you gained from the fines of speed and red light cameras needs to go to roadway improvement, not budget line items. That was implicit in our idea. I think another part is the greater awareness of wrong way driving safety on our roadways. But pedestrian bikeways are critical, but it requires a lot of reconfiguration of our infrastructure. One of the things that we passed through this year was the fact that DOT is now allowed to be able to work with our municipalities to implement and design with their roadway expertise and infrastructure expertise to help municipalities design their own safe street initiatives and to be able to apply for federal, state grants that didn't exist in the past. But there are many other things that we're doing, and truly, you know, roadway safety and what we do in the Department of Transportation and the Transportation Committee and the multiple bills that we've been able to pass on roadway safety, education, and awareness has been bipartisan. And roadway safety is absolutely critical to Republicans and Democrats. I think the most important thing you said in the beginning is to reiterate that these kind of fatalities, these kind of roadway incidences that are occurring are preventable. And that's the greatest shame when we see these fatalities, when we see these kind of incidents happen, when bikers get hit by speeding cars that are being distracted by either their phones or kids in the back or just the kind of lack of attention to the roadway and respecting the roadway, being impaired. So I think the bottom line is we still have a very, very long way to go. But the awareness, the engagement, and the infrastructure changes to understand what we meant. Because I'm looking at your speed in regards to the incidents that are occurring, right? One of the components that we learned was the fact that we no longer have sedans with low hoods that people could indeed, if they're hit, be able to roll. Because with the on-rise of SUVs and higher form structure trucks, when you get hit, you no longer roll. You are literally straight on impact. Those are the little things that we've learned as policymakers in public hearing that are important when you understand that roadway safety is critical in every aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
Long way to go.
We've all
I hope that helps.
It does, and you know, I think it's important we call out. We are, you know, we're one of 50 states. We are one of many states dealing with the same problem. Many countries across the world dealing with the problem as bad or worse than here in Connecticut. We are thankfully among the best of the U.S. states for it, but we also are, if not the most, one of the most active at the state level in trying to address this problem. I don't know of another state that has set up a Vision Zero Council the way that we have.
It took 4 years of work,
Yeah.
and I want to commend, even though she is not president, Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, who sits on the Transportation Committee with me. I'm the Republican leader on that committee. We work well together. It's a priority, the work that she has been able to work with a collaborative delegation in regards to what we've been able to do down the Stratford 4 Point and the Stratford Village Association and Sarah Roy, who does a great job. That's an example of the community coming together and making positive contributions. So ultimately, I'm happy to be able to share more information and I want to thank our law enforcement, because one of the things we did was there was a traffic light issue right at that 4 corner, and we were able to contact DOT to make sure that the staggering of the light ensured pedestrian safety. Little things like that makes a huge difference. So our engineering department and all the various other entities, it's a team effort, and I'm glad that, you know, us in Fairfield as a Fairfield delegation, but also in concert with the entire state and the commissioner and the governor, we're making inroads. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It is exciting to see the work that keeps coming out of the Transportation Committee and the state legislature, and we're starting to see it make a difference, and we're really excited to see it continue. And so I do also, just briefly before we get into introduction to the panel, want to give the first selectman an opportunity if you'd like to say anything.
All right.
Good, thanks. How are you? Great to meet you. Yeah.
I will be brief. It's not really possible. I'll try to be brief, but it's pretty clear that we're all in on this. Officer Hector's here. our Complete Streets Coordinator, Mega Jane, is here. Planning and Zoning Director, Caroline Harrigan's here. Officer Mike in the back. I mean, these guys could be home watching the Red Sox lose on TV. And they're here, right? So, Santina Duranco. Dr. Santina Duranco, who is from our health department. I mean, we've got some heavy hitters here tonight. You could be doing other things, and it just shows how important this is that you would give up your evening to be here. I appreciate it so much. When I was a kid, culture was so different. I was in 6th grade. My elementary school took a whole week. We brought old bikes in, and my elementary school teachers did a full week seminar on how to repair bikes, how to tighten your chains, how to fix a flat. And from that point on, we biked to school. So one person would bike to the next person's house and, pick up. It was like our own bike bus every day. And by the time we got to school, we probably had 50 bikers to school and back every day. And I think, the culture at that time was you expected to see groups of young kids on bikes. So the drivers, I believe, although I didn't drive at that time, but they slowed down and they didn't get frustrated because they thought it was just part of life. Something happened between then and recently, and where people started getting annoyed when bikers are on the road. Does everyone here know Sarah Roy? Sarah Roy puts a noodle on the back of her bike, a distance noodle, and it's like if you're touching the noodle, you're too close. And people yell at you sometimes, right? Like, how are you doing? We're too, too much in a rush, and we've forgotten that to just sit back and enjoy life and enjoy each other's company, and the importance of the social aspect of biking and walking together, more important than getting from point A to point B and saving a minute or two. And this has been such a gratifying experience, working with Chief Palomares and developing a framework around this effort, the 3 E's: engineering, enforcement, and education. And the engineering aspect of it was really, Sarah Roy opened my eyes to that. She sent me manuals and said, look at the before and after pictures in the AARP presentations where you see what a bad crossing looks like. And you're like, yeah, that looks like crossings that I feel uncomfortable. And then you see the after, what complete streets means, a curb extension, that you're traveling less of distance. And I kind of feel like I invested a few hours in it pretty early on, and I learned it. And I get really frustrated now. I mentioned this the other day at our kickoff, when legislators in our town, or people involved in the budget, make cracks like, what the hell does complete streets mean? And I said it the other day, and I actually mean it. If you're still saying that, and you work in government, if you hear someone say that, vote them out, because that's just ridiculous. Everyone can learn the basics of complete streets, and they should be investing in it. And Hector will tell you, he really hates going to crash sites and having to try to save people and sometimes lose people. And there are ways to avoid that, and that's what Vision Zero is all about. And I love the Swiss cheese analogy. And we're here, we've made a commitment to layer on as many slices of Swiss cheese to try to make our streets safer. And I really do think there's a real economic and mental health argument for this. But you have to have intestinal fortitude as well, because when you live in a wealthy, well-educated town, everyone's an expert. There's nothing you can do that someone doesn't think that they're smarter than you. I've been in meetings with Hector where people come in and say, we need 20 speed bumps on this street. That'll slow everyone down. Or we need, Rick, we need 5 stop signs. Only 3 stop signs. But there are people that do this for a living, and they know how to design these things. And sometimes the gut instinct for how something should work isn't really the right way to do it, and there's other ways, and we have to trust some of our experts. Mega recently, in my opinion, and everyone's gonna have an opinion on this, but I think she put in some pretty cool measures to slow people down on Villa Avenue. And boy, the hate mail. Oh, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. What are you thinking? It's so dumb, so dumb. I got an email from someone who said, this roundabout on Reading Road is so stupid. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I have to slow down to go around the roundabout. It's really inconvenient. And I sent an email back saying, you just made my case, sir. Thank you. That's why we're putting them in. We're gonna put more in. And you kind of have to have a thick skin when you do this kind of stuff. And it's not all about speed bumps, because those are the things that people feel in their gut that's the right thing to do. But as we start to learn more about this and what Mega, is observing the impact of some of the things she's doing, and are they working or not? We're not gonna get it right on the first time every time, and we're gonna try to use a data-driven approach and observe. We're gonna invest in ways to measure speed and possibly Big Brother type cameras to observe how people are actually driving around some of these things. And if they're not doing what we expect them to do, we've got to try something different next time. Continuous improvement is a big, data-driven measures and data-driven continuous improvement. I think it's really important. Make this a systematic, approach based on data, based on crash data, accident data, and also whatever data we can collect on speed and just human behavior. And if the mountain isn't coming to Muhammad, sometimes the Muhammad has to go to the mountain, and we have to meet people, where they are sometimes. If they're not going to follow what we want them to do, we have to maybe switch it up and try something different. And that's just the mentality, because ultimately the most important thing is that people slow down, drive carefully, and that we achieve Vision Zero. No more deaths. We just had a death the other day. No more. We've got to stop. We've got to really eliminate traffic. And thank you all for coming out tonight. This really does mean a lot that so many people came out. I'm not going to hold you up any longer, but thank you. Thanks, Hector, and thanks, Mike.
So we've heard
Can we have everybody use their mics? You just have to flip it up. Okay, thank you. I think that'll help. In the back, it's a little quiet.
So just an interesting note about speed cameras, because it's come up twice, and I think it's potentially one of the more contentious things that we talk about. But at a training last year with members of the Swedish Department of Transport, one of the ways they measure success is the most successful cameras in their program write 0 tickets. And whenever they install a camera, or when they get to a camera that's been installed that is not issuing tickets, they double down in that location rather than remove it. They don't consider that done. That's not when it's finished. That's not when it's no longer productive. That's not a consideration for them. At that point, that is when they know that it's working, and they know that is a location they need to be investing in, and they continue to do so. And so I think, it's one of many tools. It is sometimes a scarier one, but I think that's a really interesting anecdote about it. And so with that, though, I want to get into our panel discussion. We're going to talk about a couple projects that you have going on here in town. And so, but to start with, Mega, if you could just do an introduction about your role, what you do here in town, and how your role contributes to a town-wide culture of safety.
So hi, my name is Megha. I'm a senior civil engineer of the town. So I have 2 roles right now. I have a complete street coordinator role. Thank you to Bill Gerber for appointing me for this position and really believing in me that I can take this charge of leading the safety via traffic engineering. So as part of the civil engineer, I also contribute my traffic engineering expertise with complete streets, with traffic signals, with the safety, how this engineering actually can be incorporated into making these roadways safer. So that's one of the hardest challenges that the engineering face nowadays, to make the roadway safer, to also reach the Vision Zero goal. So that's one of the biggest challenge and a good job that I have. I really enjoy it. And there are a lot of projects that are coming in future. Villa Avenue is one of those that we incorporated some of the safety countermeasures, and there are more coming at Mill Plain, Sturgis Road. We did Reading Road roundabout. We are revamping a little bit retrofit. We are working on it. And there are McKinley School, and there's a Kings Highway, Post Road East, Chuck Handle. And these are various projects that is actually, each goal is to make the streets safer, to actually make streets complete. So those are the goals, and Vision Zero is obviously, hopefully we will reach to that point by making these small steps. So we have a lot of projects that are coming, and my expertise, and I'm grateful that I'm able to contribute my experience and expertise to these projects. So this is my role over here, and I'm also a vice chair of the Fairfield Traffic Authority.
Great, thank you. Emily?
I thought Hector was next, but that's all right. My name is Emmeline Harrigan. I'm a certified planner, as well as a certified floodplain manager, and I'm the planning director for the town. So I work in collaboration with the engineering department and other departments. We work on safety studies in some areas of the community. For example, we did a safety study for Black Rock Turnpike, actually in collaboration with MetroCog and the Post Road Circle study. But one of the most significant things that, of course, we do, and I think a lot of people know, is we liaise with the Plan and Zoning Commission on project review. And I think a lot of people are aware that we've had some fairly large projects that we've been reviewing. But I think some of the planning that we also do helps contribute to walkable communities in terms of shaping the built environment and how it intersects with the right-of-way, and how we can also help to, through our regulatory structure of our zoning regulations, evolve the built environment to support more modes, more pedestrians, installing bike parking, for example, making sure that when we review projects that there's pedestrian access, from the public right-of-way onto the project, sometimes through the project. So, for example, some of the newer developments in the Black Rock Turnpike area, those have actually included pedestrian pathways through private property that then lead you in kind of a quicker goat path to the Fairfield Black Rock train station. So, we look at things like that. We also look at, in the regulatory environment, for example, joint project entries, so that we reduce the curb cuts and the interruption between the pedestrian environments as well. So we have our fingers on a lot of different things.
Great. Now, Hector?
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I normally talk loud. I don't know if I need this, but I give it a whirl. So my name is Hector Rosario. I'm not with the fire department. I'm with the police department. I've been a member of the police department for 27 years, and I'm a Special Services Bureau Commander. What that means is I'm in charge of several units and divisions within the police department. The Traffic Safety Unit, the Crash Reconstruction Unit, the Marine Unit, the School Safety Division, the Parking Division, and I'm sure there's a couple others I'm in charge of that I probably don't know, can't recall, whatever. We move forward. So, one of my most important roles is being the Traffic Safety Commander, okay? I had my own personal experience with Sarah Roy, and that happened in my first week as a lieutenant in Special Services, where she paid me a visit to educate me, and boy did she educate me. She came with books and knowledge that it probably would have taken me 2 to 3 years to get, and I got in a crash course half-hour meeting with Sarah Roy. Nonetheless, I took that on as a learning experience, and I took as much as I could from her, and I proceeded to improve my knowledge base, because prior to that, and that was in 2022, I want to say, yeah. Prior to that, I was a shift commander in the patrol division, where I oversaw an entire shift of sergeants and patrol officers responding to day-to-day calls. So my knowledge base for traffic safety was a little bit limited, And Sarah Roy helped open my eyes to that, and I've taken off since then. So thank you, Sarah. Second, I'm also part of the Fairfield Traffic Authority. I fill in for Chief Calamaris, and I'm proud to do that. I work with Mega and Emmeline, and we review all traffic safety calming requests. And I bring my newly informed expertise of traffic safety, and I try to expand that and make traffic safety even better in the town of Fairfield. I'm proud to say that within the past 3 years, our traffic safety officers have quadrupled the number of stops in the town of Fairfield under my command. Over 255% improvement in traffic safety stops. As a matter of fact, on our kickoff for the Safe Streets Alliance, I was approached by a member of the Highway Safety Office, and she sees my name tag. She said, "I've been wanting to meet you. You guys are the lead in the entire state for traffic enforcement." And that kind of like blew me away. And I'm like, are we really the lead, or we're like second place? She's like, "Well, if you're not the lead, you're very close." So I took that opportunity to text my entire traffic unit to let them know I was very proud of them. They were in second place. Even though they're in second, I'm still proud of them. There's room for improvement, so let's get to work. So with that, I turn the mic over to the next person.
Great. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Devin Clark. I am the Senior Transportation Planner at MetroCog. That's the short version of our name. The long version is the Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments. And we are a regional planning agency that provides planning support for the greater Bridgeport region. So we have 6 municipalities that we do planning for. Fairfield is included as one of the 6, in addition to the city of Bridgeport, town of Trumbull, Monroe, Stratford, Easton, Fairfield. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, yeah. So we're one of 9 COGs in the state of Connecticut.
But the best cog. No offense.
Yeah, no offense to Rich being from NBCOG. But yeah, so MetroCog is the greater Bridgeport area, including Fairfield. And I mentioned we provide planning support. I like to think of MetroCog and the work that we do as an extension of local government, because we provide capacity on a number of different things, mainly transportation, but we also work planning and zoning, engineering, economic development. We do environmental planning as well. So there's a whole host of things that we provide support and planning on. But specifically my role at the COG, being the Senior Transportation Planner, I'm involved in pretty much anything transportation related. So whether that be applying for grants and providing funding or information to funding to the town of Fairfield, or managing corridor studies, complete streets projects, partnering or collaborating with Greater Bridgeport Transit on anything that's transit related, whether it be bus stop enhancements, a whole litany and list of things. But in my role as transportation planner, that's I have a hand in anything and all things transportation. And one thing I will add too, and Rich mentioned it earlier, but I think not only in the MetroCog region but across the state, I certainly see Fairfield as one of the leaders in Vision Zero and transportation safety. I oftentimes in other meetings or discussions or whatever it may be, reference the work that's happening in Fairfield, because you guys, the work that's happening here is very much a model at the suburban level and city level for all to want to strive to be like and mimic. So good job. So thank you.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for being here tonight for this conversation. I do just want to add very briefly that in addition to being the state designated Council of Governments, Devin and I share the Greater Bridgeport Valley MPO. And so MPOs, the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, are the federally designated transportation planning units. And so in addition to the 6 MetroCog towns, the 4 lower Naugatuck Valley towns make up the greater Bridgeport Valley. And so Devin and I work very closely together in that sense. And so in that way, we can say that we're both the best at this, and we don't compete. But yes, so thank you all again for being here. You know, I think obviously the work that's happening here in Fairfield is impressive, and it is a model for what towns across the state are looking to replicate. And one of the places where you've really done an excellent job is in some of these quick build projects. And when we're talking about quick build, you know, we saw the picture with the flex posts. We're talking about things that don't require full infrastructure reconstruction. Anything that can be, you know, designed and deployed quickly within a couple of weeks instead of months or years. And one of those that I believe recently wrapped up is Villa Avenue, the quick build on it.
Yes, and Reading Road was also the second, and there are 3 more coming up in July.
Fantastic. These quick builds really are the most effective short-term tool we have to move the needle on safety. Partially because it can take a long time to design and build full infrastructure improvements. It can take a really long time, and we've seen prices for these improvements skyrocket in past years. Traffic signals have gone from $250,000 to $1 million a piece, and it's insane. Anytime we have to do one of these projects, how much the cost has gone up. And so these quick build projects allow the towns to make progress without having to make major upfront capital investments. And the other thing they do is they help demonstrate what the project can do, what it can be like, what the future could look like. And so, Megan, can you speak a little bit to how demonstration projects like the one on Villa Avenue are being used throughout the town?
Yes.
So let's start with Villa Avenue. Villa Avenue started back in 2022. Actually, we implemented a lot of low-cost measures first. When we first went out to Villa Avenue, when we did the first walkthrough, I won't say road safety audit, but when we did the first walkthrough, that roadway was missing a lot of things there. The stop signs were not at the right place. There were unwanted, stupid signs which didn't make any sense. There was no striping done on that roadway for bicyclists. So those were the basic elements, even to before start with any kind of infrastructure or demonstration projects. Those were the major items that were missing. Those were safety issues. So we started implementing with those low-cost measures because every roadway should have these basic features first in hand. So that's the first approach that we did. So we striped the roadway. Those roadways are very wide, at least 36 feet. I think 32 to 36 feet wide roadway on Villa Avenue. So we striped it for bicyclists. We did at least 7 feet wide shoulder lanes on the Villa Avenue to accommodate bicyclists. We placed the stop signs at the right location, which were not. We cleaned overgrown hedges. The maintenance was not taken care of, and we also placed a lot of curve signs. There's a horizontal curves at that roadway, and we placed the warning signs at the right place. So those were the first things that we started doing it. So we measured from there, and we also, with the help of the police department and the Yukon, they gave us the speed feedback signs as well. So we placed the speed feedback signs. So first year, was gone in implementing these measures, and we started actually really observing that what data we are observing and how people are perceiving there. The perception of the people there with these wide shoulders was still not improved at that roadway. The people were saying we are still perceiving the roadway, speeds are really 40, 45 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour. They're going, and they didn't feel comfortable to walk on that roadway, and bicyclists were not feeling very, very comfortable. So, and not only that, there were 2 crashes. Somebody crashed on the houses at the house, and someone's roof leader was destroyed, and somebody just directly went into someone's living room that night. Crashes, they were there too. So there were major crashes that is. So people were really concerned that how, you have implemented these basic measures, now what else, what is next step, so that the perception of the people are improved, the speeds can come down. So the basic now, as I said, the engineering, to incorporate all the engineering into these complete streets sometimes is very challenging, because if you read all these manuals, they say, this is a minor arterial, this is major arterial, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. So like whatever we were trying to pick up was not meeting that requirement sometimes. So it was very, very hard to actually balance that approach, meaning meeting the federal and state regulations, as well as to also improve the perception, to bring down the speeds, to accommodate bicyclists, to accommodate pedestrians. So it was a challenging project. So we started with curb bump outs, which I did not see in Fairfield much. So we started with the curb bump outs at certain locations, and the location we picked up was based on the fact that those residents were complaining that some of the cars were crashing onto their houses. They were really, really high speeds. And also the location of some 2 bump outs were picked up based on the horizontal side distance. So we don't wanted pedestrians to walk and at that horizontal side distance, and also to make the drivers to stay in the lane. That was a major challenge. So we picked up the curb bump outs and the medians to narrow down the roadway. Even they're 7 feet wide medians, and people yell, why do you have such a wide medians over here? This is the reason. We wanted to narrow down the roadway. So we did the demonstration with the cones back in 2023, early June 2023. We did with the cones. That was the first demonstration project in Fairfield. So we did not have any flex bollards, and we did not have any mechanism to keep it for 6 months, because cones can be interpreted in any way. So we try to keep it for 2 weeks over there, and we measured the speeds were really, really down during the demonstration project. It came like 5 miles per hour down. So demonstration did work. We saw people, they were able to drive, they were able to slow down, and we saw if for the future sidewalk project, it will also accommodate some pedestrians into those median. This is why they are so wide. So the demonstration worked. It's a low-cost project. It was not massively expensive project. So we just went ahead and said, let's put the extruded curved medians and curb bump outs to test how we can, if this improvements can really work on this roadway to improve the perception, accommodate bicyclists, accommodate the pedestrians in future, and improve the perception, as well as to also improve the cycling distance, and then to keep the people in the lane, and also prevent from crashing on the houses that they were doing. So those were the major steps that we were following, and it's a minor arterial roadway, so that was another challenge. So we took that challenge and said, let's do it, go ahead and do this work. So we did the construction of this just 3 months ago on Willow Avenue, and this is working fine. The second challenge that we faced with the median was the bicyclists. Well, we did not couldn't complete the striping when the medians were done, so the striping was on hold. But we heard back from the bicyclists. They said how we are going to ride over here. That was the next education thing that we wanted to teach bicyclists as well as the drivers, that they should give 3 feet minimum distance to these drivers, which to the bicyclists, because lot of less drivers, they know how much distance they should keep from these bicyclists, and bicyclists, they get a little bit intimidated by these drivers, and of these tailgated drivers, and they try to ride it on the sidewalk. We don't wanted to encourage that. We wanted to tell the bicyclists that, hey, you can share the roadway. We wanted to educate the drivers that you should share the roadway. This roadway should accommodate each and every user in some way or the other. So what we did was we striped the bicyclist lane. We give 9 foot of the travel lane width. So if you go on Villa, that's why you see those 9 foot travel lanes. Now, that was the first major roadway in Fairfield to give 9 foot absolute minimum. So we contacted MetroCog, and we did the manuals, and we said, okay, let's try this 9 feet, which is first in this town, to give at minor arterial roadway. And we did the striping, we did the bicyclist lane, those markings, those shallows on a roadway, just to teach these drivers that you should share the roadway, and not to make nervous, not to intimidate these bicyclists, not to tell them to go onto the sidewalk, just ride on your way. So that was how this Villa Avenue project was planned and kept in mind that roadway is meant for each and every user, slow down the speed. Drivers should make themselves aware of the users. Perception reaction time, we were talking about that should increase, and it has increased. Now people are not aggressively driving as on freeways. It's not a freeway anymore, that minor arterial. And bicyclist and pedestrian has actually increased on that roadway. Now people are more coming for walking and bicyclists, according to our data, they are moving, and the speed has gone down when they see these people. So these are the major improvements that were kept in mind, and this is the first demonstration, and then another ones are also coming, which will be intersection demonstration projects.
Fantastic. Anytime we see results like that off a demo project is excellent. And so Devin, can you share just a little bit about some of the work that DOT is doing up in Newington, statewide here? And also just as part of your answer, can you just briefly describe the different ownership structures for some of the roads here in town?
Yeah. So, where should I start? I'll start with the ownership structure. So, local roads are owned by, the municipality, so the town of Fairfield. And those tend to be, lower speed roadways, through residential areas, for example. And then you have ownership of like state highways, for example, Route 1 right out here, Route 130, Black Rock Turnpike, I think is Route 58, 59? Yeah, and those are state roadways. They handle a lot more traffic. The land uses that are adjacent to those roadways are very different than the ones in your residential neighborhood. So that's just to show, the difference between a locally owned roadway by the town of Fairfield, and then something that's owned by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. So in terms of demonstration projects, and actually before I get to that, just to share something that very well leads into it. In 2020, I want to say, and the project was kind of impacted by COVID a bit, but I was undergoing, managing a corridor study in Bridgeport along Stratford Avenue and Connecticut Avenue, which I'm not sure how familiar you all are. It's a one-way pair going towards Stratford from downtown Bridgeport, and then another one-way roadway going, into downtown Bridgeport. As a part of that study, we wanted to, provide a demonstration project that is very iterative to, some of the recommendations that would come out of that planning study. And, we underwent, conversations with DOT and quickly realized that this is not a very simple thing to do. Meeting with DOT planners and engineers, nothing against engineers, but I think the planning folks are a lot more visionary when it comes to, how we approach some of these challenges. Whereas, I found that engineers are very by the book and by the number, and it can or can't work this way. So, as a part of that project, when we underwent those discussions, I found that, DOT, they were kind of questioning a lot of things that we as planners saw were very quick and simple and something that would provide a big benefit to the neighborhood. So, at the time, demonstration projects weren't necessarily something that DOT had foresaw or necessarily championed on state roads. And if I forget to mention, I'm sorry, but Connecticut and Stratford Avenue is also Route 130, also DOT owned. So, those conversations, proved that this wasn't going to be a simple process. But now kind of getting into answering your question in terms of DOT and their support for demonstration projects, I think that kind of stems back to maybe the fall of 2022. The department had applied to Smart Growth America through their Leadership Academy to conduct 3 pilot projects, pilot demonstration projects in 3 municipalities across the state. The city of Waterbury was one, which is one of Rich's communities in his planning region. I can't recall if it's Bristol or New Britain. Bristol, and then Middletown was the third.
Bristol is also one of my towns.
Okay. So yeah, those were the three municipalities in Connecticut that DOT decided to, pilot the demonstration project. Smart Growth America Leadership Academy funding too. And I think since then, going through that process, DOT then realized this is something that can be done on, state routes. Not just on state routes, but those, are the roadways that they have jurisdiction over. And a lot of, times past, they've been tight-fisted about, allowing any kind of improvement on those roads. So yeah, going back to 2022, I will say that's kind of when, Quick Build Demonstration Project kind of was championed by the department. And so much so, going through a successful implementation of those quick build projects, in Bristol, Middletown, and Waterbury, led the way for DOT to put out a couple different things in 2023 and then again in 2024. So in 2023, the department, they updated their complete streets design criteria, which basically is, a list of an approach, I guess, that DOT has in how they look and evaluate the improvements that they intend to have on, their state facilities. So that came about in 2023, and then again in 2024, coming from the Smart Growth America grant, was the Quick Build Complete Streets Directive. I have a copy of it here. I don't have multiple copies, but if you'd like, to take a picture, or I can give you my email to a link where you can access and read. But that Quick Build, basically streamlined the process that we tried to undergo with the project on, Connecticut Avenue and Stratford Avenue in Bridgeport.
And I'm sorry to jump in here. I think we have 5 minutes before the library closes, and I want to make sure we all have it.
You can go, you're fine.
We're good?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're just gonna, we'll just, at the end, when we're really done, we just need to get everybody, the custodian's gonna be at the front door, so just keep going.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, sorry.
No.
Should I cut short or?
No.
No. Okay. All right. So yeah, it going through that process with that planning, that corridor study in Bridgeport, I would say led the way for DOT to develop a more streamlined process for these quick build improvements to happen on state facilities. So in that quick build demonstration project directive, it has a list of, I want to say, 13 improvement strategies, quick build demonstration project strategies that can be implemented on state facilities. Those include a number of things, from bollards, temporary bump outs, temporary raised crosswalks, and a whole list of other things. So this has been on the radar and in the works at DOT since for a few years now. But I think more and more, especially with some of like the federal programs through Safe Streets and Roads for All, have by the federal government in Biden administration, and continuing to under the Trump administration, really proved that this quick build demonstration project is a very important step in the planning process between planning and then construction. It allows for municipalities, not just on state roads and local roads in our region and just across the entire nation, I would say, to really test some of these improvements to see if they actually work, which is a good stopgap between the conceptual planning and then actually allocating your tax dollars towards constructing things that we would like to think is a benefit, and oftentimes do run true and prove that it is a benefit to transportation safety, especially when it comes to vulnerable road users, those folks that are biking, walking, or taking transit on roads every day. So
And so, you know, the state guidance has been very helpful in what we can and cannot do. But a decision that truly is up to you here in town, and Hector, if you could elaborate a little bit on it, the process by which these projects are selected between police department, the FTA, and other emergency services.
It all starts with engineering. Engineering takes the traffic calming request, determines if it's feasible, and then decides whether they want to implement a pilot project for that particular issue. As you heard Mega say, pilot projects are pretty new here in town, but get used to them, because we're gonna continue with them. They were successful on Villa Avenue, and we're gonna get better. We weren't prepared for that pilot project because we had traffic cones. We need bollards. We need more permanent, temporary solutions, if that makes sense to you. Then we went on to Reading Road, did the same thing with a pilot project there, and that turned out to be a success. So to answer your question, it really starts with engineering. They propose it to the FTA, then we approve it or not. More likely we're going to approve it because we want to improve traffic safety here in town. And then we make a decision as to whether it's effective or not after that installation is complete. And that could take anywhere from, like she said, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If we have more permanent temporary solutions for these projects, I would love that, because we leave it out there for a couple months and get a full determination as to the metrics and whether it's effective or not. So that's my hope in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, and just, you know, kind of as a follow-up on your comments about some of the traffic enforcement your department does. Can you talk about some of the ways that your officers were engaging with drivers during the demonstration projects?
Sure, so that's, it's interesting. So I would argue that every traffic stop is an education. It's an education not only to the person that's being stopped for the violation, but for the 10 or 100 cars passing that traffic stop saying, ooh, I better slow down, cops are out here. So I use that to our advantage. There are certain months during the year, and I'm not gonna make that public, that I have my officers issue out information pamphlets to the violators. So you give the, I don't know, how many people, show of hands, been stopped by a police officer here in this room? Come on. Okay, thank you. That's more like, okay, doesn't matter, okay. You get stopped, you hand your license, you hand your insurance, your registration, the officer says, okay, I'll be right with you, stay in the car, goes back to his car. As soon as he opens his car door to return, what are you looking at? That officer's hands. Does he have a piece of paper in his hands that looks nothing like your registration and insurance card? So that's an education. I have my officers give out pamphlets with what that violation would have costed and what other violations do cost. Again, education. You're educating, you know, you're giving them a holy smokes moment, like, I'm getting a ticket, I can't believe this is happening. And then you get the piece of paper and you read it and you realize it's not a ticket. Whew. Hopefully that story is shared amongst other drivers and operators. Not to encourage, hey, you're not gonna get a ticket, go ahead and go fast down that road, but just to encourage what's on that pamphlet and sharing that information. I also utilize our social media platforms for education purposes. We have thousands and thousands of followers. So why not use the modernization to educate our residents, commuters, drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, all of the above by social media as well. So we take extreme measures in educating outside of just the enforcement alone. Me being in this room joined by my traffic sergeant in the back, education. We want to share the information to the public. We want to get that word out there. So that's kind of our approach on the education side of the 3 E's. The enforcement, that speaks for itself. We're second place, right, Mike? We'll work on that. We'll get first. First loser.
Thank you. And so, you know, Emmeline, you talked a little bit about the connection between the built environment and the public right of way. And so as the town's moving forward with demonstration projects and selecting new demonstration projects, can you talk a little bit about how these can help generate ideas and help build solutions for, you know, for what the town may look like as some of these developments come to fruition?
Well, I think
that especially if I could talk about, for example, the Fairfield Blackrock Teen Station, which was constructed with the idea that that was going to be 1 million square feet of office, right? There's not 1 million square feet of office coming to Fairfield. So, you know, in certain areas of town, we've had to kind of think about how do we retrofit that now for what we know is coming. You know, any economic development that's happening today moving forward includes housing. So it's just part of what we're gonna see across the nation, here in Connecticut and here in Fairfield. So, you know, as we look at these projects and we're adding residents to these areas, we also need to retrofit those areas to be able to support their movement around that new neighborhood, both with bikes and walking. There's plenty of things that they can walk to. All of the, you know, it's like New Haven West, right? Sally's, Pepe's, you know, all kinds of really great things for them to go to, but we need to make sure that they feel safe making those journeys, and that it's not, as I commonly referred to when I first saw it, it doesn't feel like an airport terminal where you go up the ramp and, you know, that's, you're just going to that destination, be dropped off, picked up, but it's not a place where you live, breathe, you know, and walk to the things that you need in your everyday life. So we have heard through a lot of our long-range planning, through the Plan of Conservation and Development, when we've done different workshops, that Fairfielders want more walkability. They want safety for their children, they want safety for their families, and so I think that's a really important way in which we engage together and go through the kind of the bumps and the lumps of figuring out what that means when we have to slow down and make space for each other and make space for all users of all abilities, of all ages, who need and have the right to get around within our community.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I apologize to all of you. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit on the question sheet. And I'm going to go right to, you know, we talked a little bit about this already, but having a committee as the Fairfield Traffic Authority is a pretty innovative approach here in Connecticut. And I think one that we'll see expanded beyond just Fairfield, hopefully sooner rather than later. But right now, it's still pretty unique. And so, Emmeline, could you talk a little bit about the decision to create this committee, to run traffic through a full committee, and, you know, how you envision it serving the town and working long term, and then what its success really looks like?
I can certainly start to answer it. If anybody else wants to jump in, feel free. But, you know, I think this was really born out of the commitment to Complete Streets and understanding that transportation is a multidisciplinary, if you are committed to safe streets and complete streets, that it's a multidisciplinary activity. So one of the things I think that we do a little bit differently, and for example, that as a planner I bring to the table, is this knowledge of new developments and where we can achieve, you know, better pedestrian-friendly infrastructure with those new projects. That also correlates to some of the other work that our engineering department is doing. I think that the police department helps us understand what some of our blind spots might be where we're looking at this. I'll give one example, a preview example of a project that I think has made the rounds amongst different town commissions. We have a new mixed-use project that'll be coming in the same area where Rio Bravo is today, and it's going to include like a public plaza, but we worked on the LTA to talk through, we had a particularly wide right-of-way area, and we talked through what do we want to see in that right-of-way area. And so one of the things that we talked about is not only is there room for a really wide sidewalk and also some public serving infrastructure within that sidewalk area, we also had room to provide a little buffer to that sidewalk by doing on-street parking in an area where we don't have it. So even though, you know, that kind of balances the needs and the users, it also provides that mental signal that this is a place where people want to stop and eat or shop or do whatever, and it's also an indication to the driver that it's time to slow down, right? So I think that through the LTA, I think we learn from each other. We certainly provide more broad exposure as to the questions we should be asking and how we address some of the potential projects and concerns that come forward to us. I will tell you that when we look at development projects, traffic and safety for folks in the neighborhood is always one of the big things that people talk about. Not having sidewalks sometimes, and so that also informs maybe some of those future things that we need to look at as an LTA. Do you want to add anything?
Actually, this is a good combination of, as Emmeline said, as a planning and as engineering, which is very challenging. Engineering is a whole different thing when we go and look for the complete street, but with the development, it's completely challenging to us because developers, they bring these new development and the people are like, oh, we need we need sidewalks, we need bike lanes. So FTA really helps in actually combining and actually listening to each other and come up with a single idea. So I think that's what I would like to add.
All right, why not? I'll make it really short because I know we're getting antsy here. So on that particular project Emmeline brought to the table, she suggested the parking there. And what's right near that location is the metro station. So my concern to help address that concern or that problem was how about we put some time parking there to eliminate train station commuters from parking there and occupying those spots. So I think that was a group decision. I put that suggestion forward, and it looks like that's the direction we're heading. So again, part of the group effort, bringing different mentalities together to come to a good solution, positive solution for the community.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. We appreciate your time and your input. Did you want to open it for a question or two from the audience?
Please.
All right. Well, we have I think a moment. If anybody has a question, we can ask.
We are, over time, but why don't we take 2 questions?
Sounds great. Please go ahead.
Retirement has offered me the opportunity to travel more, but also spending more time in town walking and biking. So what I've observed in other parts of the world that we don't have here are scramble crossings. And walking sometimes, whether it's on Black Rock Turnpike or downtown, it's quite difficult because we don't have scramble crossings. And is that something that's in the mix?
Rich, can you explain what a scramble crossing is?
You want to go ahead?
It's adding a diagonal to it. So if you want to cross, where you're saying I got to cross 2 streets, instead of crossing 2 streets walking diagonally, it's called a scramble crossing, where you have X's in the crosswalk.
I think the only place now where that happens is Mill Plain Road, right, where it stops the whole intersection, and I think you get to go, right? So
Well, there's
that's
a bunch of places where everything stops, but there's no scramble crossing.
right. It's
You
not.
got-
It's
you
not
gotta make the decision
delineated.
that you're going to go do it.
Yeah, it's not delineated in that way. Maybe Devin, you can speak to that.
Yeah, I can just quickly chime in. So yeah, like I have never heard it as scramble crossing before. That term is new to me.
I like it though.
Yeah, I do like it. But that's so there's a lot around that. I've definitely seen it in other parts of the world. Just from traveling and all that. But I think there is a hesitancy here in Connecticut, especially, to introduce something like that because the diagonals are often the longest crossing portion. And I think there's a balancing act of not wanting traffic to queue too long and also allowing pedestrians to get from A to B in a safe manner. And I think the way that, and Mega can correct me if I'm wrong, the way that the countdown pedestrian timers are calculated is very engineering heavy, where I think it was 3.85 or
I
something
think
like
5
that.
seconds. That's the average walking speed.
Yeah, so that calculation is very much integrated into how we determine how long a pedestrian has to cross, and then introducing a diagonal crossing into that will definitely lengthen the time that pedestrians have to cross the intersection. So I think it's a balancing act, not something that I know that the department is in favor of at this time, But I think there's ongoing research to see if that's something that's, you know, in the department and local governments are in favor of moving forward.
Please go ahead.
So comment, that is a big conversation. I'd love to see some sort of transportation options in Fairfield to get more cars off the road. For Emmeline, you know, the biggest objection to development usually centers around, you know, traffic. So is a traffic study done for everything that we build in town? Because I hear a lot, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yep, there usually is a traffic study done. It really depends on the size of the project, but clearly the projects that we've been seeing lately are, even the project frankly that was 10 units that we've had in the hopper in the last couple months, all of them have done traffic studies. So they look at different things within traffic studies depending on the speed of the roadway, sight lines, level of service sometimes. So they're looking at a variety of different things. So, you know, I think there's always room to kind of, you know, expand what we ask them to look at if we identify things that we know we need to look at more carefully. But it is always something that's analyzed. And a lot of times it's necessary because some of these projects are in state roads.
Right. And one quick one for Hector. In terms of traffic stops, accidents, everything that your division handles, what percentage of all of those encounters involve people who are under the influence of something?
I don't have exact stats off the top of my head, but it's not as many as you think. Unfortunately, crashes involving DUI though usually result in serious or fatal injury. So one DUI is too many.
Thank you for what you do. And thank you to Bill Gerber, by the way.
Yeah, so I apologize for anybody who didn't get the chance to ask a question, but your town staff are always available at town hall, or Devin in Bridgeport, or via the phone or email, or track them down tonight before everybody leaves. Did you have a wrap-up comment?
Yeah, I just have a question about, what I find frustrating is I know there are best practices and I don't feel like I have access to best practices. Like, you know, I can call Sarah Roy and ask her, but some of these things are really technical, like parking. You know, there's so much, I was Googling like different parking solutions, how we can, in town we've got a lot of empty asphalt at night on you know, big commercial parking lots, and how we could use those, but how would we marry that with transportation? So, you know, if we opened up, let's say our train station parking lots or our beach parking lots, we'd have to get people from there to town center. I don't really have a sense for what sort of micro transport, you know, options really are. What are practical? What are people using that works? That's not going to break the bank. We're not going to create a whole like New York style bus system. You know, what are the solutions that suburban towns are using? You know, we used to have a trolley in Fairfield. I wish we had never gotten rid of that. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But we're not going to build a trolley now. Like, what are people using to get people around from parking spaces off-site into town center or one place to another in a efficient way, other than Uber, you know, which could be expensive. And these, you know, I was just for my own, you know, Dr. Google, I was looking at, you can put sensors on commercial parking lots, and there are apps that you can plug in that says, okay, these are the spots that are open, and maybe revenue sharing arrangements with the property owners, that where you can basically go and park anywhere where there's an open spot in town, which would then sort of get rid of some of these issues that people, you know, are really worried about getting rid of minimum parking requirements. But if we did that and we actually used their asphalt efficiently all throughout town, probably wouldn't be a problem. We've got, you know, we call it the Bob's. I don't know how well you know town, but we're Restoration Hardware. It's a massive parking lot that's usually wasted.
Yeah, and that's common across the state. There's lots of parking, and the parking
But
needs
there's
in the parking
technology
lot
that can be
online.
implemented, right?
Yeah, for sure.
To utilize that, but who do you talk to? Like, you know, if you call a consultant and pay $1 million for a consultant to come in and figure out, you know, a parking plan for you, or are
I
you
would
part of an
recommend it.
organization that shares this kind of information?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of organizations that work on this kind of thing out there. And so I can give you some specific answers to the questions about microtransit, what's going on. Connecticut has 10 very interesting pilots out there right now for microtransit. So like a demand response, but with a bus instead of an individual car. But you know, that's really what the COGS are here for, is to be that kind of clearinghouse of information for you.
Yeah.
And so
I couldn't
would
figure
say
out who to call.
if Devin doesn't have the answer, just go ahead and call me.
Okay.
If MetroCog can't do it for you, I'll take care of it.
Okay. So I think there's, you know, as a human being living in town, like, I know I don't wanna park and walk 3 miles, especially in the heat, like, man.
Of course.
I wanna have a transportation like there within a minute, you know? And who's mastered this, and what are they doing, and what can we copy? You know,
Yeah, there
I
are
don't
some-
have the brain power to go out and figure it out, you know?
There are some very good pilot programs out there right now across
Okay.
the state. And you know, we're hopeful to see funding for that expanded, continued and expanded by the state legislature. Microtransit offers that last mile kind of fix for a lot of the problems we're facing. And so,
Micromobility.
and
Yeah.
microtransit and micromobility, so electronic scooters, e-bikes, some of these things that we're sometimes afraid of, but that really offer that extra level of mobility that we don't have right now.
Right.
And so a combination of all of the above, you know, I think the work that Doug is doing at Park New Haven is exceptional in solving
Doug
that problem. Doug
Housley.
Housley. Yeah. You know, he's got a scooter program, he's got a bike share program going. They just started a microtransit program. All in favor of solving that exact same problem.
Right.
How do they best utilize the parking that already exists rather
Right.
than add new?
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, so thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to the Bike and Pedestrian Committee for putting this event together and inviting me to speak here. Thank you to Sarah for, I guess, having gotten everybody here.